This is part 4 of Larry, the Maryland Blue Crab, the finale. When we arrived the next morning, the group again borrowed Grand Trunk 4245. I stayed behind in Hidden Valley Yard and worked the yard for a bit. After an hour or so, I turned my attention back to the crab, which was still buried behind a mass of freight cars in the car barn. I conferred with Jake Abel for a moment by radio and then began to extract the crab. I put one hand on the crab and the other hand on the cars. I pushed everything outside and moved both the crab and the freight cars to a switch leading into the car barn. I got everything in the clear and then threw the switch with my foot. I gave the crab a good shove to get it in the clear and then threw the switch back. I let the freight cars coast back towards the car barn, but made sure to keep them under control. Once the cars were back in their place, I pushed the crab away from the car barn for the last time. A few minutes later, the crab was again on a steaming bay. When the rest of the group got back from their freight run, we got to work on the crab. A piece of air pipe had gone missing. We adjusted the air lines to bypass the crab's tank completely and run off the compressor's tank. We spent a fair amount of time attempting to seal up every leak on the locomotive. We painted a mix of water and dish soap on various components looking for leaks. If we saw evidence of a leak, we would try to seal it. When all was said and done, we had tightened fittings, repacked glands, adjusted compression fittings, and generally tried every trick we and Dennis could come up with. Eventually, we had done all we could. We opened the throttle and, still hissing, still leaking, still blowing air out of places it wasn't supposed to, the crab was done. I can honestly say we only gave up after all other reasonable options had been exhausted. We reassembled the crab enough for transport and backed it up onto the transfer table. Dennis took a group photo of us all around the crab. We then uncoupled the crab from the flat car and set both aside for loading later. With the crab now officially out of service, I joined the road crew back on 4245. We continued running operations for an hour or so. Then word came down to wrap the session up. All crews began pulling the cars out of the sidings and getting them ready to go in the car barn. We assisted as best we could. When all the White Creek cars were in the barn, we turned our attention back to the crab. Sam pulled his truck up to the loading bay and the crab was loaded. The air compressor was removed from Jake's flat car and loaded in the truck along with other miscellaneous crab parts. Jake reattached the rear seat to his flat car and loaded it in his truck. Once we were sure we had everything, we moved our vehicles out of the way and said a few parting words to the people at White Creek. We then headed back to the cabin for the night. The following day, we paid a visit to the Mid-Michigan Railroad Club to catch the tail end of the Discover Live Steam convention. We then spent the evening at Mr. Abel's house viewing his collection of model railroad equipment. The day following that, we began the drive home. In late 2017, those of us who had been on the trip received an envelope in the mail. This envelope contained the January and February 2018 edition of Live Steam and Outdoor Railroading magazine. On pages 46 and 47 was the article Dennis had written up about our little adventure. So what became of the crab? As of the publishing of this video, it is sitting in Sam's garage in Maryland, awaiting its turn in the shop yet again. Like many experiments, it had its share of ups and downs. When all was said and done, this was an experiment. We were taking a partial locomotive frame and doing things with it that were not ever considered by its designers. In hindsight, I can see a few possible causes of the problems that eventually took the crab down. I'm not entirely sure the air lubricator we had was up to the task, but that's for the next time the crab goes into the shop. There have been discussions in the group about overhauling the crab and getting it to run again. Some others in the group have considered buying it from Sam. As of now, nothing has happened. I know, that's sort of a depressing end to the story. But it's not really the end. Personally, I've been a model railroader as long as I can remember. But that trip lit a fire in me. I now had some experience with the live steam side of things, and I loved it. I spent the next year looking around for live steam equipment I could purchase. I was able to acquire some 7.5-inch gauge equipment of my own through deals I can only describe as at the right place at the right time and by the grace of God. In 2018, we went back to White Creek. This time, I brought the equipment.
The whole thing's leaning to the left.
Well, if you've watched all 4 parts of this story and are still here at the end of this video, you're either already involved in the live steam hobby, or you're thinking about getting into it yourself, all I can say is, do it. Just look at us. We were a group of about a half dozen 20-something-year-olds cobbling something together and taking it out to a track that would host us to play around with it. That's how we got our start. Anyone can do this. If we can do it, you can do it. Now, before I go, I would like to extend a deep thank you to Russ Eldred of the White Creek Railroad. The White Creek Railroad is a very special place. I've been there twice, I've loved both visits, and I certainly hope to visit again someday. Russ, you've got a great railroad. Well, that's the story of the Maryland Blue Crab. Hopefully we've inspired you to take up your own adventure on the not-so-high iron. But for now, this is Jimmy with the Blue Mountain and Southern Railroad wishing you clear tracks ahead.